do not want it recorded with your face or anything on there. Just turn your camera off or whatnot. And if you need to hide your name, by all means, go ahead and do that too. So real briefly, today we're going to have our guest, Eileen Dawson, is going to share with us a couple of her favorite topics, more of an educational and inspirational, as well as some professional knowledge, and she's going to share with us. And if you have a question during Eileen's presentation, please put it in the chat. I'm going to be monitoring that, and then we'll do some question and answers towards the end. But if there's anything that pops into your mind midstream, throw it in the chat. That'd be great. And then we'll use the raise hand to get everybody to get their questions answered, and we'll go into a discussion towards the end. And let's see. We'll end up doing about 5 minutes for 3 topics each. Eileen's going to go for about 15 minutes, and then we'll open it up to conversation. And with that said, that's about all I've got to share there. So we'll go right on to the next slide. And this is our member spotlight series, Know, Like, and Trust. Hailing from Northborough, Massachusetts. All right, so after about 25 years of marriage, we get to have a little bit of time with Eileen. Her professional experience, obviously you can see it, spent in social services and human resources with a proclivity towards financial education and the fun with money. And so just before the pandemic, Eileen was encouraged enough to launch Dawson Services and went out on her own. But what's one of the most really incredible things that I've found about having gotten to know Eileen is that middle thing right in there. I don't know if you're Catholic or not. I am not. However, in my previous marriage, I was married to somebody who's Catholic. So I did get to go through what's called a pre-Cana class. And Eileen and her husband, John, taught that for 10 years. I can't even begin to think about all the stories and all the things that you've had the opportunity to witness and learn from other people in that one. And so with that, oh, her tagline, I love it. Everything works out for the best. I don't know. Do you say money when you say that, Eileen, or you just leave the dollar signs kind of hanging out there?
You know, I just put on there just to be cute, but it's technically everything works out for the best. It was my slogan in high school, and it has been all these years. So
very cool. Well, you're also highly recommended on Alignable, and you were a 2021 local Main Street mentor. So congratulations for that achievement.
Thank you.
And with that said, we're going to jump right into your first topic, which is what keeps you awake at night. So with that, Eileen, please go right ahead.
You know, this is a question that a lot of people don't really think about, but it is something that when we have those nights that we're rolling around and we're trying to figure out, you know, what's on my mind, it's different for everybody. It could be relationships, it could be medical challenges, either for us as individuals or in our family and friends. It could be money. It could be, you know, turbulence with a partner. There's all kinds of reasons why people are kept awake at night. So it's different for everybody, and some people get all of the above. So that's about it, Al. I don't know if...
Oh, no, it isn't. Oh, no, it is not. We're going to put you right on that hot seat because we had many a conversation as we were getting ready for this too, that in all of your years, particularly with for me, the pre-Cana, the engaged couple coaching, if you will, you had to have heard some pretty interesting stories about what keeps them up, particularly before you're getting married. I would think there's a lot to keep people up.
Definitely.
Heck, I'm not married anymore, but I know I still sometimes stay awake.
I remember a lot of sleepless nights before I got married, because of course you're trying to plan the perfect day, which doesn't exist. But you try. And, you know, oftentimes there's, you know, the financial burden, because weddings are really expensive. You've got the trying to work it out with your partner. Is the photographer right? Should we have a band? Should we have a DJ? All these different questions that people have. And certainly when I was working with engaged couples, there were a lot of things. There were how to work together, just communicating, being able to, work with each other on making decisions. That was huge. Another topic that was really big, that we were the junior couple at the time because we had been married 10 years or less, but there were couples that we would do the weekends with that actually were married 25, 35, 45 years. So one of the topics that they talked about near the end of the weekend was about forgiveness. And forgiveness is one of those things that's harder than a lot of other things in a relationship. And so that's why it was something that was kind of left to the end once all these other questions, had come about. What about me as an individual? What about me as a couple? Some people get married really young and they kind of grow together over the course of their adult life. I was not one of those. I didn't get married till I was 31. My husband was 34. And so we had a lot of things already established as singles, but we also were able to come together with some maturity, being a little bit older than other people. So, but there's lots of things that definitely keep people awake at night. So many things. I mean, I don't even know where to begin, listing them. I don't know your thought on that, Al.
You,
Did I cover everything?
no, well, it's an open forum for you at this point, but the first thing that comes to mind for me, and as you're talking, is what advice, after all of what you've experienced and learned, what advice do you give to anybody at this point as to how to resolve what's keeping you up at night?
Well, I think if it's in a relationship, then it's really about communication and being able to effectively communicate, not just communicate, because we can all get mad and start swearing and, do all these other things and temper tantrums and the whole bit, but that doesn't lead necessarily to constructive, feedback. And then the other thing oftentimes is, there's always the don't sweat the small stuff, and most of it's small stuff. Over the years, I've definitely learned that some of the things that I pecked at when I was in my 20s and 30s is not important to me anymore. And the same with my husband. So, and then I'd say the big thing is I've talked to, my parents were married for more than 50 years. My husband's parents were married for 63 years. One of the big things that they definitely have said is you have to be able to forgive. Going back to the big subject area that was the last part of the weekend with the engaged couples, that was a really big deal. It doesn't mean you forget, but you forgive. So that's a really big thing. And of course,
how would you apply that to, so everybody's here from Alignable, and everybody wants to network and get connected with one another. And just today, I had an experience where somebody from our group scheduled a meeting with me and didn't show up. So what advice would you give for all of us that network pertaining to forgiveness, particularly when, I could look at that person and say, you had your one shot, it's over with, because you scheduled it and then you didn't show up.
Well, it's interesting because I had a coworker way back when I was working with folks with special needs, and she ran a group home. She had probably a staff of 15 people. And what she would do is she would either call or she would reach out to them. This was probably, before email. And she would say, I just want to check to make sure you're okay. I thought we were meeting at 2:00 or whatever. And it's interesting because sometimes people put it in the wrong day, which I'm guilty of. Put it in the wrong time because there's a time zone difference. And then the other thing that can happen is somebody had something that came up. I'm dealing with a few people right now that I'm trying to follow up with, and they've got a sick partner. They've got a dad that's sick. They've got a child that's, and of course, some people are, struggling with COVID. So there's a whole lot of, things that instead of jumping to the conclusion that that person blew me off and they're wasting my time, sometimes there's things behind that we don't even realize. So if we kind of lean in with some caring, oftentimes we'll get to what the answer is. And it also keeps the door open to be able to work with them in the future.
Awesome. I'm going to advance the slide and go to your I think the topic that I certainly have wanted to hear about. And that's your 7 rules of conflict.
Yeah, it's interesting because we learned this in the 10 years that we were working with couples. And I've had many friends say, can you send me that list again of the 7 rules? And some of these, some of them have been married for 35 years, but there's still always something to learn. And there's always techniques that can be used at any time with any relationship. There's times where as my kids are growing up, it's like, ooh, they're not really doing what I would like to do. They're not necessarily picking the boyfriend or the girlfriend that I would like to have for them. And so there's definitely things within the conflict resolution or even within ourselves that we can do to make that communication and relationship better.
I forgot to get rid of the placeholders in there. So,
Oh,
the
okay.
Laura
So this is
Ipsum,
number
we'll
1.
forget about that part, everybody. But
Yes.
That's number 1.
Yeah. Is that Latin?
I believe it is. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So these aren't necessarily in any particular order. They're just seven conflict resolutions. So the first one that we taught and we learned was no swearing. It's very easy when we're in a situation to let those things slip and name call, or, all of a sudden find that we're, letting those 4-letter words go as the conversation and the conflict is escalating. So that was a really good one that we definitely practiced early on. I came from a family of swearers. My husband came from a family of not swearers. I came in with like a bull in a china shop with communication. He would, say to me, that's, you're very blunt. And I knew that wasn't a compliment. And so over the years, I learned that, what, maybe I should step back for a second instead of, belting out what's the first thing on my mind. So I thought was a really important one.
Cool. And I'm wondering, how does that relate in terms of, while it's not swearing, with political correctness these days? I am not a politically correct guy. And so do you equate the two together by chance?
Well, it's funny because, I have really good communication skills, but there's communication skills that my husband has that I don't necessarily have. And years ago, he would say to me, don't talk about politics and don't talk about religion, because those two, if you are talking with someone that's really feels very strongly about it, they will try to convince you of their view. And so it can lead to, frustration. It can lead to being angry because you don't necessarily agree with the politics of that other person. So not that it leads to swearing with my friends or family, but it certainly can add some extra conflict where if you have self-control, you can work it out. But if you're just like, they're sticking their feet in the sand and you're like, yeah, I'm going to stick my feet in the sand, it can really lead to a lot of bad things. I mean, my husband is disconnected with people on Facebook because of the political, shoving things down his throat. And he doesn't like that. So he just, kind of gently just unfriends or just unfollows. And I guess they can't always see it as well. So that's pretty cool, So yeah, that's what I would say when it comes to politics and religion.
Number 2.
Well, this is a beauty. No past history. It's very easy, especially my husband would say, you have such a good memory, so you can drag stuff up from years ago where I don't remember it. And, to make my point in a conversation or a little bit of turbulence, I might say, well, you do this all the time. You did this 5 years ago and I thought we had, taken care of it. And then you did it last year and you used to do this all the time when we were first together. And so when you do that, it makes people usually on the defense. And it also makes people, want to shut the conversation down because all of a sudden you're throwing, the kitchen sink at them when it was really just that particular situation that needs to be addressed.
Awesome. Number 3.
And the no third party, to make a point, is similar to the no past history. My mother agrees with me. She's always saying that, you just don't listen. And, my sister feels the same way. We had a conversation 5 years ago and, you're always, not, especially the always and never. Those words are very generalizations, and they're not necessarily something that's fair. I can remember a roommate said to me, when I was frustrated with her about something, and I said, and you did it last year, and 3 years later, she goes, really? Did you ever address that with me? And I'm like, no. And she goes, okay, so you eat the ones besides the one that you brought up to me right now. I will take responsibility for this one because now I understand that, it ticked you off. And then we'll deal with that. But I'm not eating all the ones that you brought up in the past, and I'm not eating all the ones that you think because your mother agreed with you, which in fact may not even be the case. But sometimes we bring that into an argument to try to build our case of why we're right. So
Would you agree that that's probably not a good sales point or tactic either, particularly when we first get networking with people?
yeah, especially, yeah. I mean, there's people that have, blown off a couple of meetings, and who knows what's going on in their life. Sometimes you have too much going on. You've got personal issues going on. And sometimes you just do mess up, 2-3 times. And so, some people, it may make sense. You know what, this person they're just blowing me off. And if you can sense that, then it's like, okay, it's time to let this relationship go. But sometimes it really is a person's told you that, my mom's really sick. She lives with me. I have to take care of her. And so I'm sorry, my job or my business is sort of second place, and I have to be able to, deal with that immediately. And sometimes I have to bring her to, a doctor's appointment, and I have no warning. They're going to take her in the next 10 minutes. And I just didn't have enough time to reschedule with you. And so, that's okay. I mean, those things happen. None of us are perfect.
That's actually a revelation. Nobody's perfect. We're not.
Yeah.
What?
Well, I mean, most of the time I am, according to my husband, not. But yeah.
Yeah. See,
And
now that's a great segue, Eileen,
yeah.
because that felt like a hit below the belt.
Yeah. And, of course, with 3 teenagers, I'm still stupid, as a parent. I won't become, intelligent until I guess they start having kids or they're out on their own. And then they realize I never thought my mom was dumb, but with 6 kids, with the first child not being able to sleep through the night for a year, I would continually call her and say, how did you do this? How did you have 6? I can't even manage 1. And then, of course, when you lose control, the second and the third just add more chaos, of course. But yeah, my kids don't always listen to me right now because I'm not smart yet. So around 25, they start to turn around. Oh, good. My son didn't even want to have anything to do with me on vacation a couple of years ago. He'd walk down the street and down the boulevard on vacation with his dad or his 2 sisters, but he wouldn't walk with me. And he said, Mom, it's nothing personal. I said, Brian, everything about that is personal. So, but now now it's not just going to Kohl's and he calls me, to make sure none of his friends are in there. Okay, Mom, it's okay. You can come in now. So slowly that's going away, which I'm excited about. So this particular rule is about not hitting below the belt. We all know what our spouses, our partners, our kids' triggers are. And it doesn't go well when you start doing that. Then they start throwing the punches. And the next thing people are mad because somebody said something about, I have an example. One of my girlfriends was talking with her husband and he said, you're fatter than me. Now, that is hitting below the belt big time. And I'm sure if she said that to him, it probably would be too. But I can tell you as a female, if my husband threw that at me, first of all, I don't know that we'd still be married. I probably would have killed him. But also, I think for women, nobody wants to have their body image, criticized by their spouse. Where if I said to him, hey, you know what, I'm not going to buy you a size, 38 pants. You have to make this 36s work. He doesn't want to go shopping. So he's going to make sure that he keeps his weight to a place that's going to fit into those 36 pants. So it's a kind of a covert, it's a covert way. Yeah, I refuse to go up in wardrobe either because it just slowly sneaks on. And the next thing you know, you're 50 pounds overweight. So yeah, I have to keep my pants structured too. The sweatpants over the last year and a half have not been my friend. But yeah, we know what the partners below the belt is. We all know what they are. And when we
Before
pull those
we-
out in an argument, it goes south.
So before we move on to number 5, in a network type of environment, which again, we're all in, is there something that we can do that would actually be construed as hitting below the belt in your mind? That's a tough question.
You know,
I have one in mind, but
I had posted something on Facebook that was a statistic that 7.8% out of 10 people are in debt. And my cousin wrote back saying, "Where is your statistic from?" And I thought, of course I went. And the first thing I thought is, you're a jerk. And then the second thing I thought was, all right, he wants the statistic that. So I went online, I figured out what my source was, and then I gently threw it at him in a nice way, but it was definitely, kind of, screw you, whatever you want to call it, So that can happen. But I thought, well, I don't all of a sudden want to, pollute an email to him that's like, you're a jerk, and you're trying to belittle what I'm saying in front of all these people that are reading it. So, I'm like, be nice, give him the statistics, but don't, make him lose face in front of all these people that are waiting for my response. So that's an example I'm
you.
thinking of in the, business or networking.
Cool. All right, number 5.
So this one's a little harder. If you're in the middle of an argument and it's going to turn south, which it can very quickly, to be able to take some time out, whether it's just for a couple minutes, whether it's I'm going to go take a walk, I'll be back in an hour, then that's okay. Or maybe it's hours, before my husband and I, when we first were buying our house, it was a huge undertaking. It was going to be the most expensive debt we've ever had. And there was some conflict. He wanted to buy a boat with his brother. And I'm like, we're ready to buy a house. We're only putting 5% down, and you want a boat, and I need a new car. So, it became one of those things where he went out for a walk in the rain to, make sure that, I'm going out for a walk, and he left. And so when he came back, of course, he was soaking wet and he was more ticked than he was when he left. But I ended up calling my mother, and she said, "Oh, it's the house. It's all about the stress of buying a house." And I said, "No, Mom, I don't think so." And she's like, "Yes, it is." So in fact, it was. And we figured that out a couple of weeks later. But if we hadn't, and if we hadn't taken a break, then it would have gotten really ugly, and the below the belt would have started. And my mother thinks that, you're not as, good with money as I am, and blah, blah, blah. And it would have led to all these other violations of these other 7 rules of conflict.
Okay. I've been on the phone with the sheriff in Nevada.
There we go. Okay, so would it be fair to say that these two have a lot to do with ego?
Sure. Yeah. And power. Some of it's about part, a lot of times relationships, you don't realize it, but there's a little bit of power play going on, whether it's, your dad was really easygoing and mom walked all over him, or mom was easygoing and dad walked all over him. And so when you go into a lot of relationships, it doesn't even have to be a couple. It could be, with sisters, it could be with, coworkers, it could be almost anything. And if people don't kind of, play nice, like my son and my husband don't like to say I'm sorry, even when they're sorry, where I will say I'm sorry and it de-escalates the situation immediately. They'll say it's okay. And all of a sudden the conflict is resolved. But there's times where it's like, I know I'm not wrong, and they never say I'm sorry. So I'm going to stick my feet in and I'm not going to say I'm sorry. And so that just makes the situation worse, of course. But yeah, it's an ego thing now, definitely.
I was going to try to quick look, and I'll still do that when you go to the next one. I want to share something with everybody it was a teacher's perspective on how to say sorry the right way. Have you ever read that? It just popped into my head as you were saying
haven't,
that.
no.
I'll find it while we're going here. So number 6.
So this one kind of intertwines with some of the other ones as well, which is to keep to the issue at hand and focus on the topic. We had a situation that escalated very badly about 6 weeks ago or so. My daughter was really ticked because my son he was taking a soda and he wasn't replacing it in the refrigerator. And she would put a few in and then he would drink them and then she'd have to drink a warm one. And she came in the kitchen, she's swearing and I'm trying to stay out of it, but all of a sudden she engaged me. And so I went in and started talking to my son about, you need to say sorry and you have to be careful, this happens all the time. And he would not take responsibility for it. He started spitting at me, started spitting at her about hitting below the belt, with whatever he could come up with. Then all of a sudden my husband came involved. And of course he had had a few beers, and you know what happens when someone has a few beers, there's not any filter at all. And so this thing escalated to all these different things about, I don't want to be in college and da, da, da. And there was just all these different things that were coming up. And I kept saying, let's keep to the issue at hand. The issue at hand is about soda and not being respectful and putting fresh soda in so that it's cold. And this has been going on, he just doesn't seem to listen. And that's what the topic is at hand. It's not about anything else. It's not about what someone else didn't do 6 months ago. It's just about that particular issue at hand. And it's easy to start getting off topic and start bringing up everything else to make your points.
And I didn't find that really quick, so I'll do my best. I wrote it down. If you all have questions or you're thinking about things too, as this is going along and you write it down, share it with the whole group later. That's what I'm going to do with that. Okay. Number seven, I think is the hardest one. And it is holding hands before the argument is too intense. And it requires foresight and being able to, look at that one. And when you start to see, because there's, I am not a morning person. My husband's not a night person. And when I would bring up conflict at 9 o'clock at night, he would turn into Hyde. He was usually Jekyll, but at 9 o'clock at night, if I brought up something that he perceived to be something he didn't want to hear, then he would turn into Hyde. And then he would start throwing the kitchen sink at me. So if somebody, well, first of all, I learned over the 25 years not to bring it up at 6 o'clock or something like that. But in order to de-escalate the situation, this is true for couples. I don't know, I guess you could do it probably with your kids too, just put your hand on their arm or something when they're really, really upset. But for us, when we could think before it escalated enough to just put our hand on the other person, there is this chemistry that happens that all of a sudden de-escalates both people. I know my brother would always say, he's been married like 35, 40 years. And he said, my wife and I, when we were early on in our relationship, we would pay bills in the nude, because when you're nude, you're both vulnerable and you're getting into a topic and doing something together. That's not the funnest thing to do. And so I've never done that. I have to say, I haven't wanted to be that vulnerable while I'm doing my taxes or whatever, but I don't know. I got Jess is watching now. So she just heard that. So I'm thinking that's a great strategy for us.
Hey, as long as you're not doing it in the office all the time.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah, definitely. You don't want to be doing that with your coworkers, over Zoom or whatever, but yeah, it's a very hard one to do. Because a lot of times it can be, when you're having trouble with forgiveness in the heat of the moment before it gets too bad. Because once it gets bad, you want to bite someone's hand off, not hold it. So that's when you can go back to the one of take 5 minutes, take an hour, take, a few hours and calm down and then come back together. It's almost like the same thing, except it's immediate. But again, I think this one is the hardest one, at least for me, it is.
We're definitely not going to do that in our networking group.
No,
Holding
no.
hands if we get an argument. So. All right. So we're about 30 minutes into the event. Trying to keep to a schedule so that we can get to a question and answer or an open discussion. Do you want to try to do your other topic?
Yeah, the other one doesn't take a lot. Yeah, the other one really doesn't take much, Al. I mean, this is the one that's really about communication that I think is extremely important, whether it's personal, whether it's business. We all have our weaknesses. None of us are perfect. And, each area people can probably relate to.
All right. And that's you on vacation, right?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, no, that's me in about 25 pounds and about 30 years ago. So I use the 7 steps as I'm dealing with people, as I'm coaching them. They're Ramsey steps, and I really like them because they're very simple steps and they're easy to walk through. I have attention deficit. And so for me, things have to be easy. If I've got 5 credit cards and they all have a different amount on them, I'm going to start shuffling those things around and they're going to get lost. So I really just keep to my debit and 1 credit card. But the first step when somebody's in debt is they feel like any kind of emergency. Like I just had a $700 eye problem on my dog yesterday. We won't even get into the fact that it was thousands of dollars with the other 2 dogs too in the last few months. But by having $1,000 emergency fund, I could pay that $700. I could get my car fixed, for $600 or $800. It seems like they're never $50 anymore. But to be able to have that money so that it's not being thrown on a credit card is really a great way to start.
How would you define an emergency though?
It could be almost anything. It's not going out to dinner. But as far as an emergency, it could be, there's a problem with the dog. I've got to go and, go into the ER because, something happened with one of my kids, or I got something in my eye. So it could be almost anything. It's not a vacation. It's not necessarily, buying extra. Well, I mean, I guess you could use it if you're low funds because other things happen and you need to eat or you need to pay your electric bill, those basic things. It's just, it's needs instead of wants usually. So yeah, that's the first step that I teach. And then the second step is usually where most people are. It's where 7.8 out of 10 people are. Actually, about 7 or 8 out of 10 don't have an emergency fund, but throughout the country. But the second one is, like I mentioned before, I have attention issues. So for me to be able to focus on something is a lot better than trying to take the whole, thing. I work with kids that have $40,000, $80,000 of student loans, and it's just overwhelming. They make $30,000 a year and they're like, oh my God, how am I going to pay this off? So what I typically do is I will teach, let's bang out the first one. You got $1,000 on this particular loan. Let's pay that. You've got, Discover card has $800 on it. Let's get rid of that one. And so that way they can be success. Let's say there's 10 avenues that people have debt. To be able to kind of start at the beginning and knock those out, there's successes. It's like if you have 50 pounds to lose, that first 5 can make or break whether or not you're going to continue. So to be able to have those small victories, a lot of times helps people to feel like, hey, I can do this, So that's where I spend most of my time because most Americans are in debt.
So you go after the smallest one first and then take
Yeah.
that payment and apply it to the next one?
Yes.
That's the kind of snowball
Yes.
effect you're talking about? So it just
Yes.
gets
And
bigger,
it doesn't
your
matter what
payments-
the interest. Yeah, it doesn't really matter what the interest rates are. And if somebody wants to combine all their debt, then they just have a big mess of one particular debt. And then it starts again. It's like rolling in $20,000 of credit cards into your mortgage. You just push the problem, back, and probably that 20,000 ends up becoming 50 by the time you even pay it off 15, 20 years later. So yeah, that's a really good point, Al. It's usually the small ones first. That way there's a success. And like you said, if it's $800, then you move it to the next one and you just keep going and going.
All right, number 3.
The third one I teach is the 3 to 6 months of expenses. Once all the debt's paid, before that, when someone's in debt, they're not really looking at retirement. They're not really looking at having an emergency fund of sorts. They're trying to get through today. They're trying to get through tomorrow. And so once people are out of debt, except their house, then they put a 3 to 6 month of expenses away is great because, people lose their jobs. People have, things that come up, medically or with their car, they have an accident or whatever. There's all kinds of reasons why to have something that's 3 to 6 months of what your bills are every month is a great thing to have. And it also gives you a feeling of safety. So, that's a really key one. And usually a 3 to 6 months, I like more than 6 months, but 3 to 6 months is definitely a good start that will cover most things that are more than the $1,000.
Is that a savings account that you don't touch unless you are, something's happened to your income stream?
Yeah,
Is
it's
that
pretty
what
much, it's
that's-
pretty much in cash because if you put it in a mutual fund and you had 10,000 in there and all of a sudden the stock market, stumbles and it's down to 4. Now that's what I did in college. When I went to grad school, I had like $5,000 to get through my last year and the market went down and it was worth 2,200. And then I totaled my car. And so that was beautiful. I was on a great track. I wasn't going to have to borrow anything, but I didn't have 3 to 6 months of expenses in the bank. I didn't even have $1,000 of expenses in the bank. I didn't understand how money worked. And I had a nice fat credit card too, because they gave me a credit card. I got a free umbrella, when I was 18 with, Citibank. And I was like, wow, I've arrived, not realizing that, you start swiping that thing. And the next thing you know, I had $5,000 or $6,000 on credit cards. So, that's kind of why it's good to have that. But yeah, cash is the way to go for those. Unless it's a really low, if it's like a money market account that, pays you 10 cents a month, it could be in that too, because the interest rates are so low that you're not really getting much on cash.
And so number 4, before you start talking about that one, do these tend to become cumulative? So you're kind of working 1 and 2, then you go to 3, and then you're going to 4. So this is really kind of a progression of steps.
Yes. Because
Okay.
if somebody, let's say somebody starts right off the bat, I'm going to take 15% of my income and I'm going to put it into retirement. If you're sitting there and you got a credit card that's at 22% and that's just rolling every month, it's like you're better off get rid of that debt. And that way you can completely focus. Maybe you could even put more than 15%. If you just got a mortgage and monthly bills, you can free up quite a bit of money to be able to invest. Now, something that I was asked when I was pregnant with my first child, I was a human resource manager. And we had somebody come in from one of the big firms and talk about Roth, 401ks. And so, as I was escorting him out, he asked me a question and he said, Eileen, how much do you need in retirement? And I said, as much as I can save. He's like, that's not the question I asked you. How much do you need in retirement? Give me a number. I said, I don't have a clue. I'm like 34 years old. That's like 100 years away. And I'm not really thinking about it, but it got me thinking. And so when I would see that, it's not the first time I've seen, like save 15% of your income, because it will end up, if you start in your 20s or you start in your early 30s and it just starts being its own compound interest, which is what, the 8th wonder of the world, I think, or the 7th wonder of the world. And so, that way someone can just focus on that and they don't have to worry about these other distractions of, my credit card and this, that, and the other thing. So that's why the 15%, if someone can't do 15%, they can work up to it.
All right. That's good. There we go. So number 5.
So number 5 is starting a college fund for the kids. I can remember when I was an HR person with my first 403B, when people had come in, I was like 26 or 28 years old, and they came in to talk. And of course I was in HR, so I brought them in and, attended the meeting and everything. And they said, you need to take care of yourself before you take care of your kids. Your kids can, work, they can, borrow student loans or whatever, but you can't fund your retirement if you're spending the money on the kids. So, when you get to retirement, it's all over. You're not going to be able to probably save that 15% a month unless you continue to work. But you have to take care of yourself first. And that was something that I definitely heard, a lot when I was younger in HR. So, but, to have a college fund's beautiful. I have a lady that I'm working with. She's a doctor. She makes really good money. Her daughter is a freshman in college, like my son. And then she has 2 other ones coming up. One's in 10th grade and one's in 11th grade. She has nothing saved for any of them. Now, I couldn't whip up a miracle when I talked to her in May and say, hey, you know what, I got this secret way where I can all of a sudden, help you save tons of money. I wish I could have caught her 5 years before, because she probably would have a nice, college fund at this point, at least for the one that's 18. So, but, when people can do that, but all the other things kind of have to be taken care of first before then, the college, the 529s or, whatever other ones people want to put into.
Sure. So I did put in the chat, Eileen, for those that don't have kids, we have plenty, and we're willing to let somebody else do that college fund for our kids.
Right, exactly. Or they can,
We're givers
invest
like
more.
that. We're generous.
Yeah, like if people don't have kids, they can put more into retirement, or the next step, which is paying off the house. They could do whatever they want, you know? But yeah, not everybody has kids, and not everybody wants to put into college funds. Some people like, you know what, the kids are on their own. If they want to go to college, they need to pay for it. We're going to be paying, you know, we're going to be taking care of ourselves, our house, or, you know, retirement. So it's not necessarily a must. And then number 6 is paying off the mortgage. A lot of times people don't realize when they have a 30-year mortgage, they just kind of assume that that's what I should do. I should, you know, do it over the course of 30 years, but it doesn't have to be like that. You know, someone can pay it off in 15 years if they want. You know, our goal was to be able to start putting money into the kids' college fund when we paid off the mortgage. So, and then to be able to have it, you know, right there ready with college bills that were about the same as our mortgage, and be able to, you know, kind of pay as you go with college. And so, you know, that's something that's nice. And other people might want to start saving for vacations or whatever. But to be able to have that gone, you know, some people's philosophy is, you know, I don't want to pay my house off ever because it's going to keep continuing in value. But I can tell you that when you don't have a mortgage, it feels different. And when you go outside in the backyard with your bare feet, it's yours, and nobody can take it from you unless you don't pay your taxes. So there's a psychological freedom that comes with that. That's pretty cool.
And without getting into any specifics, do you have a methodology that you implement for people on how to pay their mortgage off early? Because I've heard a bunch of different ones over the years.
Well, it's funny because, you know, we had a 30-year at first, and then, you know, the interest rates went down. It was almost 7%. Then it went down, and we paid like $5,000 or $6,000 for points, but we didn't realize that it was going to go back down again. So we refinanced like 3 times over the course of 5 years. And the first 2 years of our mortgage, it kind of made me disgusted that, you know, we were paying $1,200 a month. And at the end of 2 years, all we had paid off was $2,400. And the rest was interest, and it was PMI that people have to have before, you know, if they have less than 20% down. And so that was nasty. And, you know, I looked at the amortization schedule, and I looked at, you know, how is this going to all shake out? And it was going to take 20 or 22 years before we'd break even with, you know, 600 is principal, 600 of it is interest. And so people can pay it off early, you know. Oftentimes, if someone's got a 15-year mortgage, it's just a few $100s more a lot of times. You know, if the mortgage is $3,000, then it's more than, you know, $300 or $500. But for a lot of mortgages that are between $15,000 and $2,000, which a lot of people's are, to be able to throw that, you know, extra $500 or whatever, it can shave off a whole lot of money. Same with student loans. You know, student loans are dragging on for 20 years. People are in their 40s. They probably have kids. They have a house, and their student loans are still being schlepped around. And so how in the world do you start saving for college and retirement when you have these big student loans that you've had for 20 years? When I was going to school, it was 10 years at the max. And a lot of times people would live at home for a couple of years. And, you know, for me, it was like, I'm paying these off because I don't know what kind of bills I'm going to have when I live on my own. So, but people could definitely pay it off. Mine, I paid it off in 3 or 4 years. So instead of, you know, the 10-year term that I had. And with a mortgage, it is. If you actually take a look at the amortization schedule, or if you refinance, like I have some friends that are in the mid 50s, like I am, that just refinanced, again, a 30-year mortgage. So how in the world are you going to be paying that off when you're 86? I mean, I suppose you can, but it's definitely stressful, very, very stressful to still be having that when you're in retirement, because most people don't have more than 100% of their income, you know, coming in when they're retired. And then the last, and then the last step is building wealth and giving. There's 3 things you can do with your money. You can save it, you can spend it, or you can give it away, or all 3 of the above. But those are the only things.
I'll volunteer for that last one, by the way.
Yeah,
if you want to give it away, I'll volunteer.
Yeah. When you got everything covered, you know, you can give. But it's hard to give when you have, you know, you have bills.
All right. Well, thanks for sharing all that. We're going to go to the question and answers. And there is a question that came up, and I'm going to read it. It says, my husband refused to pay off his student loans because the interest is super low and it is a write-off. He calls it good debt, in quotes. What's your opinion on that?
Well, I don't know. I'm not a tax expert, but as I understand it, if there's two people, it's a $24,000, deduction at first on our taxes. So I don't know whether or not those student loans really are covered. The other thing is, if you have $1,000, let's say you owe $1,000 in student loans and 400 of it is interest, whatever your tax bracket is what you're going to be taking off. So it might be that you have, $1,000, 800 of it is actually interest, and you get to take off, if you're in the 15% tax bracket, you get to take off, let's say 10,000 would be easier. Then you get to take off, 800 or so. So you still have that 9,200 that you have to pay, because it's not, if you pay, if you have $5,000 or $10,000, let's say, you don't get a credit. It's not necessarily that you get that, $2,000 credit. You actually get it as a deduction. So if you're in the 15% tax bracket, it's only 300. You're still, spending whatever it is. I'm confusing you a little bit with the money, but if we're just looking at $1,000 and someone's in the 15% tax bracket, they only get to write off 150 of it. And so the other 850 is just going into the interest. So, and the other thing too is, when you drag on student loans forever, they're like an anchor. They just kind of drag around with you. But if you can let it go, it's one less thing that you have to think about. It's one less bill that you have. And there is a freeing feeling about being able to get rid of that.
I got stuck just there on the let it go part. I started to sing the Frozen song. Anybody else? Me. Okay. I saw a couple of hands. So any other questions for Eileen, either personal or professional? This is our opportunity to learn a little bit more about her. And anyone, go ahead and unmute yourself and go ahead and ask.
I have a question. How is it that you actually can get to a place of, when you're that intense, to hold your partner's hand and calm down?
It's the hardest one. It requires, like, if you're at the point where you want to smack them, not that you would, but I mean, you psychologically, you want to give them a good cheap shot. If you're at that point, it's tough. And one would have to kind of be quiet and then reach out and say, hey, let's hold hands. Let's work together in this. You want one thing, I want something else, but we can come up with us. And so if you can catch it before it's ugly, then that's the best method for being able to actually hold someone's hand.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
What about starting off a difficult conversation already doing that?
Yeah, that's a good point. I don't know if my husband would necessarily do well at 9 o'clock at night if I did that, but definitely, to be able to sit down and actually talk about a tough subject area and be able to hold their hand. Yeah, it's not going to escalate like it would if you're not, because then all of a sudden you're one, you're actually holding that person's hand. So, if you escalate, there's going to be energy that goes to both of you that's going to be unpleasant.
Awesome. Thanks for the question, Ellie. Anybody else have a question they'd like to ask Eileen, professionally, personally, experience, skills? Okay, so I'm going to be doing these every 2 weeks. So thanks for participating in this one. This is our first one. And Eileen, thank you very much for being the guinea pig. And
Thank you.
What you saw was a slide presentation that Eileen did have access to. So the way that this works is I will send you an invite to a Google Doc first, and then we'll work on a slide presentation. And because we're just figuring this all out, we didn't really have much time to get a lot of that done, but you'll be able to get in there and actually create your own slides out of that, just looking for the intro slide and the Q&A. Everything in between is basically, you have free reign to share what you'd like to share. And we're going to try to keep these to less than an hour. So if you're interested, let me know and we'll get you on the calendar. And again, I'm going to do a little editing on this particular video so that it transitions and there's some smoothness to it. And then we'll post that as a resource section for all the other members, because the only way we're going to start doing business with one another is by getting to know each other. Hopefully you started to like Eileen a little bit there. I've met with her, I don't know how many times now, Eileen, but I know I have trust in you at this point. So how are you planning on getting to that space with the 12,000 plus members in that group? And that's the challenge, right? And somebody put in the chat about and I think the point was the misconception or how you can misconstrue electronic messages and whatnot. And so that's going to happen in our group as well. And even on some of the other events, things happen so fast when I do the other ones. If you're participating with those, you may not get the right impression. So this is an opportunity for you to give off an impression as well. So again, if you'd like to do that, connect with me on Alignable. And Eileen, would you please put your contact information in the chat?
Sure.
I neglected to make that slide. We didn't catch that when we were reviewing that. So if you'd like to reach out, Eileen is available on the Alignable platform. You can find her in the All About Networking, and it's, let's see, I think I actually copied your profile there. There it is. I'm going to put that in the chat too. So you can click that link and find it, Eileen, right on Alignable, and I highly recommend connecting. And at a minimum, have a face-to-face with her and get to know her a little bit better. And whether you do business with another member in the group isn't as relevant as it is to form that relationship and understand who they are, what they do, where their value is to your network. That's how this is all going to work. Okay, awesome. And did you put an email in there for everybody?
Oh, I could do that.
Cool. Is that a mobile? Is that textable?
It is.
Okay,
Yes.
cool. All right. Well, for our first event, you did great. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Look at that. You're getting claps. That's awesome.
Fortunately, Al put this together so I wouldn't get nervous and have to be looked down all the time. Oh, what are the 7 rules? Oh, and you did a good job too, Al, of kind of leading, more questions than I may have been given detail initially too. So.
Well, it's a tough one to necessarily if you haven't done a lot of presentations. So one of the things I'm going to share this, and I hope you don't mind. And if you do, we're going to have to go to that conflict resolution thing. So you were nervous. One of the first things you said was you weren't sure whether or not you could do this. And my first thought was, yeah, I know you can. What would you say to everybody that's watching and that does watch? What's your advice on actually participating and doing this?
Well, I would say, Al definitely put me at ease. I was expecting to have this sort of structured, type of presentation that was, kind of formal and I wasn't sure how I was going to feel about that. But, Al would say to me, I want to hear your story. I want to hear what is your experience? What made you come to this place in your life? And, everybody's got a story. And everybody has experiences that a lot of times they don't realize they have, that other people would love to be able to learn from. So from the get-go, Al kind of led the topics and what we were going to, get into. I love the fact that he said I was the guinea pig. And I'm like, oh, okay, well then, whatever the bar I set, as low as it is, then people will, have a great place to go from there. So, but yeah, no, I think the fact that you did say, about, talk about your experience, because that's what, you're an expert at, and, show, what your passions are, and definitely I've always been very passionate about couples. I'm always, sad when I hear that a couple's not going to make it. And obviously, we have a whole lot of that. We've got 50% of our society that's not making it. So to be able to share what I've learned, and knowing that my friends and family have said, what are those 7 things again? Can you tell me what they are? Can you send me it in the text? Feels good because you can make a difference in people's lives in a positive way.
And so I want to clarify one thing. Those were your topics. I didn't pull, we pulled them out in the conversation together.
Right.
Right, okay.
You put some
I
organization
didn't
to them.
feed you any topics. Those were all your
No,
topics.
no, but I had
Okay.
the structure and then you filled in the blanks on what I would need to be able to talk about, to be able to explain, what it is that we're, that we wanted to present. So
Awesome.
yeah, Al's great about that. And when things got quiet during this presentation, he took the ball and either asked me questions or he moved on to the next topic. So the whole time I felt comfortable, Al, that I knew that you were the narrator and that you would be able to, help the conversation continue to flow. The questions, if I was looking in the chat at the questions, it would have totally distracted me. So I appreciate that, you took that over.
So don't be afraid. Right? We can sum it up that way.
Absolutely.
Take
Yeah,
the-
because I
take the
mean,
step.
I'm not shy, but I am when I'm on the camera. Or if I'm up presenting something, then I'm definitely shy.
If you'd like to do this, let's do it. All right, with that, I think we can end. We've got you. You're going to get 4 minutes back of your life. There you go. Never say I didn't give you anything.
Thank you so much, Eileen. This was great. And
You're
Al.
welcome. Thank you for coming.
Yes, it was wonderful.
Great.
Awesome.
You did a
Thanks,
great job.
everybody.
That was so nice. Thank you, Eileen.
You're welcome.
All right, everybody. Enjoy your week. We'll see you. The next event is next Tuesday, 4 p.m. The Quick Connect, another hour of meeting other members. Very good. All right. Bye, everybody.
Thank you, Al.
You're welcome, Eileen. Thank you. All right. How do I end this thing? There it is. All right. Bye.